Welcome back to your channel. My name is Brad, and today we're going to talk about SVOL and my meeting notes that I had with them and give you all the details and my thoughts. That's what you're looking for. Stick around. I had a meeting with Eric, and next thing you know, we have to get other people involved because my conversation turned on some of the past holdings and what were they doing and what were they thinking, and got into some other aspects that he actually wanted somebody with a little more detail of the day-to-day going on, being part of the meeting. And I'm just going to say I really do appreciate their time because we spent more time than we had allotted for that call. Now, I'm going to say 100% by the time you get to the end of this video, you may be thinking they may never talk to me ever again, but I think they realize what I'm saying is, one, going to be 100% factual because I'm only going to present the public data that's available, or the public data that was available at one time, and walk you through history. That is part of the issue. Is I've seen others talk about SVOL, but they don't walk you through history of the last 4 to 5 months of what's been going on because they haven't been downloading the actual holdings, which I'm going to say I do not download on a daily basis. But starting today, I am downloading and I will be tracking. And if things don't change, I may have to sell. And that is my opinion. Maybe not your opinion, but mine. And I'll go into exactly why during the video, because I think some people need to understand what's going on behind the scenes. And again, this is all public data. You can go start tracking it yourself, but we're going to walk through it. The first reason I contacted Eric was due to this comment. This comment was made on Seeking Alpha, and it was a comment to an article on Seeking Alpha. I'm a Seeking Alpha affiliate, so if you want to go, link below, don't have to, but it was a good article. But then this guy made, I didn't even put the guy's name up, but a certain gentleman made a comment in one of the posts. And I said, wait a second, is this guy correct? That's what stimulated this whole entire conversation with SVOL. What he's saying is that the hedge was not directly aligned with the actual calls of the VIX. So if they have a February VIX call, they don't have a February hedge against it. So what they ended up doing was doing a February call and have an April hedge. That's alarming. That was concerning. So I wanted to find out right from them what is going on with the hedges. And what I can tell you, and I can believe this from the conversation, was the hedges are just fine. What they're relying for the short-term hedge is the put options. They found on August 5th, when we had the great big VIX spike, that the actual hedge of the put options gave them better hedge than the actual hedge of the C50 VIX calls. So that is why there's a discrepancy between them having a February and having an April. No, they're not aligned, but the put options is what's covering that shorter term hedge. The others are longer term hedges, and we'll get into longer term hedges in this video because you have to understand some of the structure of SVOL. Just pointing out what they've done, but let's go back through history. 9th is what we're going to start with. On August 9th, they had AGGH, Buck, CDX, High, MTBA. That was very simple. They had two VIX, September 24th and October 24th. Then they had some bonds, then they had their put options, and then they had these C50 index VIX, which was their hedge. And they directly aligned September and October. The conversation was before August. This was pretty standard for them, that the way that they were running the fund worked. There was no issues. So that's what they had on August 9th. Downloaded the data for you could see it. Now, what happened, and this is why I start to frown on SVOL a little bit. On October 25th, they had AGGH again, they had BUCK, they had CDX, they had IVV, which is the S&P 500, they had MTBA, and they had NMB, and then TYA. Got it. But that IVV, when the S&P 500 was nullified, it was nullified by the S&P 500 E-mini futures contracts that they had for December 24th. Notice that the IVV is 16%. That futures contract was 16%, so it nullified. So it was literally not making you any money either way. Market went up, market went down. That is hugely alarming to me, because at one time, that IVV was up to like 25%, 24%, and that is what I want to be tracking, because they have changed that holding and went from a neutral holding back to a positive holding to a neutral holding, and you literally have to be looking at their holdings every single day. So currently their NAV is down, the distributions are going down. No question about it, right? But where does those distributions come from? It's the short VIX futures, about 25%. They have the limit strategies, which is the short-term VIX exposure, longer-term fixtures at times, right? And buy hedges on the VIX options and equity puts. And as equity puts is what everybody's missing for the short term. The hedges for the VIX options are for longer term. And then they have bonds, which you wouldn't think are very risky, but because of the rate cuts, the bonds are going down in price and the yields are changing. And it's a whole slew of issues that they're having. Income producing securities, which is short-term securities. And then I have the question mark, because that is the new question of the day. Because again, I watched others and this is what they said, but they don't have the question marks, because there is a new question mark of what they're going to be doing going forward. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's because you haven't downloaded the holdings as of this week. And that is the problem. You got to stay on top of these guys. Let's talk about distributions. You can see starting in August, they started lowering distributions, and they said this was due to the rate cuts. And I fully agree to a point. Because the rate cuts go down, the treasuries are going to pay less. That is 100% true. I can bring up a treasury chart and show you, since they started in August, that they have lowered their rates, and you can see that the short-term treasuries, being the blue line, have gone down in price on what they're actually paying to the orange line. No question about it. 1 year or shorter, their yields are less. That is 100% true on that section. But, that's a but. What about that 16%? Because if you start doing the math, that 16% was money sitting on a sideline, not making you a single penny. Nothing. Nada. Zilch. Doing absolutely nothing. They could have had it in a money market account making you something. But no, they didn't. That's the problem. It should not have been a neutral holding, and it didn't happen just from October. October, November, December, multiple months, and you're seeing your distributions go down for multiple months in a row. So you don't think that Brad didn't notice this. And that is why he is stomping his feet today and saying, I need to track these guys a little bit harder, because if they don't fix this, this is something that I will have to put the sell on, because you can't have money sitting on the sideline for multiple months, not generating any revenue, and think that Brad's going to be happy, because Brad can just put it in a cash account and make more money than you holding it in a neutral holding. IVV than the neutral E-mini futures, making it neutral. I can just put cash under the bed. I don't want cash under the bed. So if they're listening, no cash under the bed. Don't sit it aside. Invest it to make something. And hopefully it's invested in something that's not going down in value. Please. So there you have my conversation on that. But let's look at the VIX. What they don't understand about the VIX is they're selling these future contracts, and they're rolling these future contracts out. So to understand this, they were doing short VIX, right? So they're doing 30 days, or they're doing 60 days. So if you go down to Contango, down below, I've done a kind of videos about Contango, and that really means it goes up and to the right, or better yet, as it gets closer to the actual date, it goes down. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. So when they say percentage of Contango, that 2.14% is where it is at 30 days. That 2 is actually from 30 to 60. That 0.34 is from 60 to 90. So now you can see, if you're writing them out 90 days in advance, you can add those all together, but you have to wait 90 days for them to be, for the futures, because it's futures. Just to give you that thought of how they're actually doing this. And that's where they make their premiums. They make their premiums so from rolling those future contracts at a higher price, and it depreciates, and they get the differential. And that's where the premiums come in. Hopefully that makes sense to you, but we're going to get into that in more detail later on in the video. So if I look from August and I look from that date forward, SVOL is down 6.6%. I looked at AGGH, Buck, CDX, and NMB. If I take these holdings and I take their weighted, and that is their weighted average of SVOL, they attributed about 1% of the NAV depreciation. So, okay, I can accept the bonds and treasuries went down in price, and 1% of that is attributed to the underlying assets. 5% or 5.5% is contributed to the structure of the VIX, because on August 5th, it went into backwardation. That means instead of going up and to the right, it went down to the right. And we're going to show you a short video of how this actually works. And we're going to go through a timeline. And what you're going to look at is Contango 1 and Contango 2, because those were the short term. And that's where they were making their money. And as we start the process and go day by day, you're going to notice that those change. Go negative at times on the 3, and the 4 that go negative. And as we continue to go forward, you can see those percentages changing. Remember, they're trying to make 16%. And then we get into August 5th, and it goes into backwardation, and those numbers turn negative. And that's where we get into the problem. And this lasted for a while, and then it came out of it. That shows you how it worked. And then you looked at the shorter term VIX, and they get the 12, 13% on the short terms. And they continue to go on month to month. And that's where the VIX comes into play and how they roll their calls. Because as we go through this, you can see that it's starting to normalize. And then we have a backwardation again on the short term. And then we continue to get normalization of it flattening back out and going back to contango. But October, we have backwardation again. That's an issue. So we went August backwardation, October backwardation, and then we start to normalize back out to contango, where it goes up and to the right. But it takes a long time for this to occur. And that is part of the issues. So November, we're back into contango. We're running through contango. It's going up and to the right. And that is what we want to see. Up and to the right. We continue to go through, up and to the right. All the way through November. We get into December. And we continue to go up and to the right. Every single day, it's up and to the right. But then it's turned back to up and to the right. And we're back into contango. And is everything humpty-dory? Don't know. I'm going to say we had some backwardation, a couple days. You saw it on the charts as it moved forward. And we're going to have to monitor that. And why do we have to monitor that going forward? Because remember the great financial crisis? We had months, quarters of backwardation. I'm bringing up a chart. March 31st, 2008, it was in backwardation. June 30th of 2008, it was in backwardation. September 30th, 2008, it was in backwardation. December 31st, it was in backwardation. March 31st of 2009, it's still in backwardization. So you would have had a problem for them to try to make 16% on your money for a whole entire year. Now, SVOL, you would have got wiped out. That was a complete year of backwardation. Complete year. You would have got, because they do 100% and not 25%. It would have killed you. Not literally killed you, but it would have really wrecked your account if you were heavily involved in SVOL. So let's talk about this. We're going to talk about that roll yield. So if it's 2% per month, and you saw how those numbers changed, and you got to start figuring in averages every single day, what that actually is, 2% per month times 12 times 0.25% is approximately 6% annually. Got it. If it was 9% per month, 12 months, 0.25, it's 27% annually. I think these are probably the two extremes that you may see on their rolls. The problem that you get into doing the complete math is the bond yield. Let's say it's 3% and 75% were in bonds. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, it's not 75% in bonds. That is not what they're holding today. That has changed from the SVOL from before. So before August, before the time period, yes, about 75% of the holdings were in bonds and treasuries and making some type of bond yield. And they were getting you about 2.25% in yield for, that helps you out. The hedge cost was about 2.5%, and the expenses were about 0.72, right? So you can see the two extremes, 5% to 26%. And they try to average that out and try to get you that 15%. And that's where the problem comes in, because they had 3 months that we know that that wasn't 0.75. We know it was closer to 0.5. So that brings down that yield, which is costing you money. That's right, because they took it out and they tried to save the NAV, more or less. But did they save the NAV? They made it a neutral position. They would have been a whole lot better off taking that neutral position and taking it on and off, because in the end of the day, the S&P was probably up a little bit, which would have helped us. So that gets us to today. So I know this has been a long video, and hopefully you understand and follow the math that things are changing at SVOL, and it may be for the good, maybe for the bad. That's what we have to figure out. But we shouldn't have neutral holdings. So let's look at this week. This week, 31.26 is actually in treasuries, bonds, municipal bonds. Then they have the treasuries that they have on, so only 54%. 54% is collecting you about that 2.5%, 3% yield, not 75%. SPY is about 45%. And then I noticed that they put those future contracts on, making them nullify. So right now, 11% of the money sitting in SVOL is doing you nothing. Zilch. They are trying to protect you on the downside, but they're not doing you anything. And that gets you to the next one on the bottom of the page. They wrote a call option on the SPY. Yes, so I'm not leaking anything that's not known. They have opportunity to start writing covered calls on the SPY. That's appears not 100%, and it wasn't even 100% confirmed during our call, that they have to generate more revenue to be able to give you that 15% yield. They're collecting a bunch of yield from the VIX. They're doing some treasuries. But all of a sudden, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to start seeing covered calls on SPY in SVOL. I don't think this can't be breaking news, because this came out earlier the week, Monday, thereabouts. So this is a week old's worth of data. So hopefully that explains maybe what they're doing and where it's going. When we look at their calls that they have now, they're on the VIX. Let's back up. Let's wheel it back. They have the puts. They have the puts in January 8th, 17th, 21st, 22nd. Those are going to be your protective puts, and those are for the short term. Your VIX is February, March, April, May, June, July. Wait a second. Wait a second. Time out, ladies and gentlemen. July? That's 6 months out. That's not short-term VIX contracts. That's 6 months. Just thought I'd throw it out the conversation. Then they have the longer VIXs, and these are the hedges on the longer VIXs for April, May, June. So far, I like what I see, because if I go back in, I can start adding up those VIX contracts, because they're 6 months out, and that roll is rolling all 6 months. So if we have a different VIX at a different percentage, they can roll and get you that 2%, 4%. Hopefully they're getting a 6% a month. If they're doing 6%, that'd be doing something for us. And why do I say 6%? That's just a random number, because 6% a month times 12 times 0.25 is an 18% annual yield. Brad came up with 6% because that's probably an average that we could or could not have. Their bond yield is approximately 3%, thereabouts, right? 0.5. We know it's 54% now. So that's an annual yield of 1.5%. How much money are they going to get from the SPY options? And that's the problem that we have today, ladies and gentlemen. They're not writing everything on the SPY yet. And do they have to write everything on the SPY? I really don't care how much they write on the SPY. What I care about is that my NAV doesn't go down, and if the SPY is going up, they shouldn't be capping it. And I want a little more income. I want to maintain that 15, 16%. So now you can see how the math turns around and we're back up to that 16% range compared to where it's going down to about 15. They're trying to target 15%. So I get it. So let's think about SVOL, if you're watching, writing those calls when you can on green days, because that became a conversation. Is on a green day, you get slightly more premium for call options. Write them on the green days, get us that income, maintain that 16%, and we'll see how the NAV holds up or not holds up over the next few months. I will be tracking these, downloading them at least 2 or 3 times a week to make sure that we're actually selling calls and this doesn't come into just a neutral play of 45% of the fund not making any revenue, because that would just be, I don't know, that's just literally, it would be 45% if they're not running cover calls on it. Right now they have 10% of it doing nothing, and I can understand that because that's protecting us on the downside. So at the end of the day, they are protecting the VIX with the puts. They're protecting the longer VIX calls with the C50 VIX. Everything there is fine and dandy on the VIX. What needs to get fixed is how do they get the NAV to be slightly appreciating and a little more additional income due to the bond yields falling. And that's where they're looking at the cover calls. Can they write cover calls on SPY over time to give them a little percentage to help cover when the VIX doesn't pay enough on the rolls? Hopefully this explains what's going on. I know this is a lot to take in. It really is troublesome a little bit that I'm now seeing calls on SPY, but I get it. They need a little more income because they can't rely on the income due to the bonds and the yields on the treasuries. So I get why they're rolling to this, but we can't have multiple months where it's just a neutral holding. Put the money under the bed. Really take it out and put it into a savings account at some bank and get 0.5%. I'm sorry. Did I go? I didn't mean to go there. Yes, I did. It doesn't make sense to have neutral holdings. If I wanted a neutral holding, I wouldn't just be putting into SVOL so you can charge me 0.72 to have a neutral holding. I expect income from that. I am not selling. I still think it's a great fund. It's still an alternative. But if I continue to see holdings that are sitting there not generating yields, what are my options? That is the conversation. The conversation needs to be, if you're not generating yields at 15%, and I don't care if it's treasuries or doing some kind of cover calls, or I don't care how you're doing it. I don't want a whole lot of NAV erosion, and I don't want you falling behind on paying distributions because you're not generating enough yield with the money that we have given to you in the holdings. So sorry, Eric and Simplify. I'm going to call you guys a hold right now. And if I don't see changes, it's going to turn into a sell. And that's troublesome because I think these guys have been straightforward and very honest. I really do. I don't think that they're trying to do you any harm. But we have to have revenue generating. Anyway, that's the end of my video, end of my rants. And I really do hope that it works out because Eric and team are really good people. They're just not able to generate the revenue that needs to be done. And it's a little bit concerning. Until next time, God bless.